They often say blood is thicker than water. But I learned a hard lesson. Sometimes, blood can also be what drowns you. One cold, rainy Boston afternoon. I trudged wearily back to my small apartment after a 36-hour shift in pediatrics. Rain soaked through the white blouse I hadn't even had a chance to take off yet. I'd spent the whole day saving a 6-year-old girl from septic shock, and finally, I'd succeeded. My mind was reeling, caught between the joy of saving a life and the gnawing worry about my sister Sophie's worsening condition. Just 2 more weeks, I told myself. My hand trembling as I opened my banking app to check the savings account I'd painstakingly built over the past 7 years. $175,000, enough to cover a large part of Sophie's heart surgery. But when the screen loaded, it felt like I'd been punched straight in the gut. $0. I blinked, thinking it was an app glitch. Logged in again. Still $0. My heart hammered against my ribs. I immediately called the bank, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Mr. Parker, your account was completely emptied yesterday via an online transfer. The transaction was executed with all your valid security credentials and your electronic signature. The world felt like it was collapsing beneath me. I knew exactly what had happened. Ryan. My older brother. The one my parents were always so proud of, the Parker family's Wall Street star. The one who, just a week ago, had convinced me to sign a temporary power of attorney so he could invest smartly to help me quickly grow the money for Sophie's surgery. I bolted out of my apartment, driving like a maniac to Ryan's office in the financial district. But the office was locked. I called, no answer. Finally, I drove to my parents' mansion in the Boston suburbs, where I knew Ryan often went for Friday night family dinners, a tradition I rarely managed to join because of my hospital shifts. When I pulled up, I noticed the brand new Ferrari parked in the driveway, a car Ryan hadn't owned a week ago. Fury surged through me. I pushed the door open without knocking and found the whole family gathered around the lavish dining table, complete with expensive wine and laughter. Everything stopped when I walked in. Ryan's cheerful expression instantly turned tense. Ryan took all my money. I screamed, my voice cracking. All of Sophie's surgery money. My parents' reaction wasn't horror or confusion. Instead, my mother, Eleanor, looked down at her plate while my father, William, let out a weary sigh. "Ethan, you're overreacting," William said, his voice laced with the familiar coldness he always used with me. "Ryan is helping you invest that money. It's not taking your money." "Investing? In that Ferrari?" I snarled, pointing out the window. Ryan stood up, his composure chillingly calm. "You're stressed from work, Ethan. I get it. But don't make dangerous accusations like that. I could sue you for slander." I couldn't believe my ears. "Sophie will die if she doesn't have that surgery. Do you people understand that?" Eleanor finally spoke, but not in my defense. "You always make everything so dramatic, Ethan. Sophie will be fine. There are other treatments. There are no other options." I yelled, tears welling up. The doctors made that perfectly clear. I pulled out my phone, declaring I was going to call the police. That's when William stood up, his eyes menacing. "You will do no such thing," he said slowly. "No one will believe a pediatric resident drowning in student debt against a successful Wall Street investment manager. Ryan can prove you willingly signed the power of attorney. In fact, if you call the police, I'll tell them you have a history of psychological instability and that you're making things up out of jealousy of your brother's success." The second shock of the day hit me. They weren't just protecting Ryan, they were willing to destroy me to protect him. But why? I whispered, unable to comprehend. "Sophie is our sister." "Sophie will be fine," Ryan interjected, his voice oozing false concern. "I have an investment plan that will double the money within a month. You'll have enough for the surgery and then some." I looked around the table, searching for a flicker of empathy, a sign that they understood the gravity of the situation. But all I saw was the defensive wall that had been erected long ago, the wall that separated me from my own flesh and blood. I backed away, stunned. "Sophie only has 2 weeks," I said. My voice shattered. "If she doesn't get the surgery." "That's enough, Ethan," Eleanor cut in. "You always blow things out of proportion. That's why you'll never be as successful as Ryan. You're too emotional, too weak." I stood there, in the house I grew up in, looking at the people who were supposed to be my family, and I finally understood. This wasn't a family. This was a power game, a hierarchy where I was always at the bottom. And Sophie, my poor Sophie, wasn't even part of their equation. I left without another word. As I drove away, I saw a text from the hospital. Reminder, deposit for Sophie Parker's surgery must be finalized within 72 hours to hold the surgical slot. I pulled over to the side of the road, my whole body trembling. It wasn't just the lost $175,000. It wasn't just the family betrayal. It was the possibility that I would lose Sophie, the only person who truly mattered to me. In that dark moment, I realized I was utterly alone in this fight. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because when you have nothing left to lose, you'll do anything to fight. And I was ready to fight not just for Sophie, but for justice. I wiped my tears, and with hands still shaking, I dialed the number of the sister I hadn't spoken to in years, Amanda. The one my parents had disowned after she'd abruptly and mysteriously left the family 8 years ago. Amanda, my voice broke when she answered. I need help. The line was silent for a moment. Then her voice, still as strong as I remembered, came through. You found out, didn't you? Found out what? I asked, my voice choked. About Ryan. About Mom and Dad. About everything. Amanda replied, her voice laced with a familiar pain I hadn't recognized before. Ethan, you're not the first. A cold shock ran down my spine. What are you talking about? Meet me. Amanda said curtly. Not over the phone. They could be listening. Harborside Restaurant, 30 minutes. I'll explain everything. Harborside Restaurant, right on Boston's waterfront, was a place few in our family frequented. A discreet location, far from the financial district where Ryan was often seen, and far from the wealthy enclave where my parents lived. When I walked in, the soft jazz music and dim lighting created an unexpected sense of security. Amanda was sitting in a secluded corner, her back to the wall, her eyes constantly scanning the room. The 8 years since she'd left hadn't changed her appearance much, except for her eyes, now sharper, more vigilant. Her brown hair was pulled back neatly. And she wore a professional pantsuit. Amanda was now a successful lawyer, a stark contrast to the impulsive young woman who had fled the family years ago. You look like you've been through hell, Amanda said as I sat down. No hug, no pleasantries. Just a anked truth. It feels worse than that, I replied, my voice hoarse. Ryan took all my money. $175,000 for Sophie's surgery. And Mom and Dad sided with him, Amanda added, not as a question, but as a statement. I nodded, surprised by her insight. How did you know? Amanda took a sip of her red wine, setting the glass down carefully. I noticed a slight tremor in her hands. Because they did the same thing to me. 8 years ago. My college fund, $120. 000 I'd saved up from part-time jobs and scholarships over 4 years of undergrad. Ryan said he could help me invest it so I'd have enough for Harvard Law. The third shock of the day hit me. No way. A month before tuition was due, it all vanished. Ryan claimed the investment failed. But 2 weeks later, he showed up with a brand new Porsche. You didn't tell me, I whispered, feeling betrayed in an entirely new way. Amanda's lips thinned, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. I told Mom and Dad. Their response? Honey, that's a valuable lesson about the financial world. Ryan knows much more about these things than you do. She mimicked Eleanor's saccharine, false sweetness perfectly. You didn't go to the police? I tried. But I had no concrete proof. Ryan's very clever. He had me sign papers that I later found out waived my right to complain. Amanda took another sip of wine. That's why I disappeared. I took out loans. Went to a less prestigious law school, and swore I'd never be conned like that again. I looked at my sister, suddenly realizing I'd never truly known her. So, what do you do now? A small smile touched Amanda's lips. I'm a lawyer for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Ethan. I investigate financial fraud. I blinked, a tiny spark of hope igniting. So you can help me? That's why I'm here. Amanda opened the leather briefcase beside her, pulling out a thick file. I'd been keeping tabs on Ryan from a distance for years. He didn't just scam us, it's a pattern. A mini Ponzi scheme. He uses the family name, Dad's connections, to get access to wealthy people who trust him because of William Parker. As I opened the file, I saw financial reports, charts, and pages of printed emails. Is this legal? Amanda raised an eyebrow. Not exactly. But I needed to know my enemy. And this? Ethan, this is our enemy. The last page in the file was a report on a car accident from last year. Ryan, driving drunk, had hit another car. A young woman was seriously injured. But there was no arrest record, no charges. William took care of it, Amanda explained when she saw me reading it. Paid off the victim's family, made the police report disappear. It wasn't the first time. I felt sick. Dad knew about everything Ryan was doing? Not just knew. He enabled it. William isn't a victim in this, Ethan. He's an accomplice. I sat in silence, trying to process it all. Everything I believed about my family was crumbling. What about Mom? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Amanda sighed. Eleanor is more complicated. She knows, but she lives in denial. William controls everything, the money, the social connections, even her identity. Eleanor Parker isn't her own person anymore, she's just an extension of William. And Sophie? I asked, my heart clenching at the thought of my sister. I need that money for her surgery, Amanda. I can't let her. I know, Amanda interrupted, her voice softening. And I'll help you. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the money anymore. Once we start this, there's no going back. The Parker family will never be the same. I stared into the glass of water in front of me, my face a blurred reflection on its wavering surface. The face of someone who had lost all faith. Our family never really existed, did it? I asked, not really needing an answer. Not in the way you thought, Amanda replied, reaching across the table to take my hand. But we have each other now. And we have Sophie. So what do we do now? I asked, feeling a new resolve replace the despair. First, we need the money for Sophie's surgery, Amanda said, pulling out her phone. I have savings, not enough for the whole thing, but enough for the deposit and to buy us some time. You don't have to. I owe you this, Amanda cut in. I abandoned you and Sophie when I left. I can't do that again. In that moment, I realized Amanda had carried her own guilt for the past 8 years. We were both victims, but in different ways. Second, Amanda continued. Her tone shifting back to the serious lawyer, we need to gather evidence. The power of attorney you signed, the bank transactions, every communication between you and Ryan. Everything. And then? Amanda opened another file, pushing it towards me. This is a plan. But you need to know, it won't be easy. Ryan and William won't go down without a fight. They'll use every trick in the book, threats, slander, even trying to ruin your career. I have nothing left to lose, I said, my voice low. You have Sophie, Amanda reminded me. And that's why we have to be smart about this. I nodded, recognizing she was right. I opened the file and began to read Amanda's plan. It was detailed and comprehensive. As if she'd been preparing it for a long time, just waiting for the day I'd finally see the truth. You've been waiting for this, I observed, looking up from the pages. Amanda nodded. Unapologetically. I'd been waiting for the day you'd be ready to face the truth about our family. I knew it would come, I just didn't know how. But why would Ryan do this? I whispered. Still unable to grasp it. He makes millions from his job. $175,000 isn't even. It's not about the money, Amanda interrupted. It's about power. About control. Ryan was raised to believe he deserves whatever he wants, at any cost. William created him in his own image. I mulled that over. And now they'd let Sophie die for power? They don't believe it's life or death, Amanda said softly. To them, everything is negotiable, even life. They believe money can solve any problem, but on their terms, on their timeline. I glanced at my phone as a new text popped up. From Sophie, Ethan, the nurse said my surgery might be canceled. What's going on? I'm scared. Tears welled in my eyes as I read it. Sophie was only 19, too young to face a critical heart condition, too young to be dragged into the Parker family's dark mess. Amanda looked at me, concerned. From Sophie? I nodded. Unable to speak. Don't tell her about Ryan, Amanda advised. Not now. She needs to focus on getting better. Then what should I say? I asked, my voice breaking. Tell her you'll take care of it. That you'll never let anything happen to her. I texted Sophie back, my fingers trembling on the keypad. When I hit send, I looked up at Amanda, a new determination replacing my despair. Where is he? I asked. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Ryan? Probably at the Obsidian nightclub in the financial district. He's usually there on Friday nights. But Ethan, we need to. I stood up. My chair scraping against the wooden floor. I'm not waiting. Sophie doesn't have time for long-term plans. Ethan, listen to me, Amanda said, grabbing my wrist. Confronting Ryan directly right now will only put him on alert. We need him off guard. So what do you want me to do? Sit and wait? Sophie needs surgery in 2 weeks. No, Amanda shook her head. Resolute. I want you to play a part. Call Ryan. Tell him you understand what he's doing and you need more time to make sure his investment plan succeeds. I stared at my sister, uncomprehending. I'm not following. Trust me. If Ryan thinks you're about to expose him, he'll erase evidence and prepare his defense. But if he thinks you're caving, a glimmer of understanding dawned on me. He'll get careless. Amanda smiled, not the warm smile I once knew, but the smile of a predator who had spotted her prey. Exactly. And in the meantime, I'll take the $75. 000 deposit to the hospital tomorrow morning. You'll tell Sophie everything is fine, that the surgery is still on schedule. I sat back down, letting out a long breath. Relief washing over me as I realized Sophie wouldn't be in immediate danger. What about William and Eleanor? I asked. We need to approach them separately, Amanda replied, taking a sip of water. William is an impenetrable wall, but Eleanor, she might be the weak link. Eleanor? I said, surprised. Mom always sides with Dad and Ryan. Publicly, yes, Amanda agreed. But privately, I'm not so sure. I think Eleanor is a victim in her own way. I closed my eyes, trying to picture the mother I rarely truly understood. Eleanor Parker, elegant, controlled. Always perfect in every social situation. But sometimes, in rare unguarded moments, I caught a look in her eyes, a distant, sad look I could never explain. So what do we do? I asked. My eyes still closed. Tonight, you call Ryan. Play the victim, Ethan, exactly what he expects from you. Let him think he's won. I nodded. Though the thought of pretending to reconcile with the man who had stolen my sister's lifeline made me sick. And then? Amanda turned to the last page of the file, pointing to a name I didn't recognize. Then, we meet with this person. Jessica Zhang, an investigative journalist from the Boston Globe. She's been tracking William and his questionable business dealings for years. But she's never had enough proof. Until now, I concluded, understanding my sister's strategy. Exactly, Amanda nodded. But remember, Ethan, this isn't just about your money anymore. Once we start this process, there's no turning back. Ryan could face criminal charges. So could William. They deserve it, I said. My voice hardening. They deserve to be held accountable, Amanda corrected. This isn't about revenge, Ethan. It's about justice. About ending a cycle of abuse that has gone on for too long in our family. I nodded, understanding the subtle difference. This wasn't about hurting those who had hurt me. It was about stopping them from hurting anyone else. Amanda glanced at her watch. We should go. Meet me at the hospital tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'll bring the deposit. And Ethan. What? Don't engage with William. He's more dangerous than you think. As I left the restaurant, I felt a shift within me. The chill of betrayal was still there. But now it was wrapped in the fire of purpose. Sophie would be safe. And those who had tried to destroy that would face the consequences of their actions. On the way back to my small apartment, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Dr. Parker, a strange voice asked. Yes? This is Dr. Abigail Chen from Boston University Hospital. I understand your sister, Sophie Parker, is scheduled for heart surgery with us? My heart pounded. Yes, that's right. We need you to come in immediately. There's a complication. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the curb as panic flooded me. Is Sophie okay? There was a terrifyingly long pause before the doctor answered. Your sister has gone into acute heart failure. We've moved her to the ICU. Mr. Parker, we can't wait 2 weeks for that surgery. She needs it within 48 hours. My world imploded. But we don't have. I can't. We understand the financial situation, Dr. Chen interrupted. But this is a matter of life and death. If she doesn't have surgery within 48 hours, we can't guarantee Sophie will. She didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood. Sophie could die. I'll be right there, I said, already turning the car around and speeding towards the hospital. As I drove through the increasingly heavy Boston rain, a single thought echoed in my mind. Sophie couldn't wait for our long-term plan. She couldn't wait for justice to be served, for Ryan to pay for his crimes. Sophie needed that money now. And I would do anything, sacrifice anything, to get it. Even if it meant becoming the very thing I despised most. A true Parker. Boston University Hospital had always been the place I felt most at peace. The smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights, the steady beeping of machines, it was a world I understood, where everything had its own order and logic. But tonight, as I ran down the hallway to the ICU, it all seemed foreign and threatening. Sophie Parker, I gasped to the nurse at the desk. I'm her brother, Dr. Ethan Parker. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair pulled back neatly, looked at me with deep understanding. Dr. Chen is expecting you, she said, leading me into a small room. Sophie lay there, her skin pale under the hospital lights. Too many wires, too many machines for such a small body. I'd seen similar sights hundreds of times with my patients. But seeing Sophie, my little sister, like this, it stole my breath. Ethan, Sophie whispered, her eyes fluttering open as she recognized me. Her voice was faint, like wind through leaves. I'm here, I said, taking her cold hand. Sophie managed a weak smile. Sorry to bother you. Don't say that, I whispered, my heart constricting as I looked at my sister, always so strong. So optimistic, now too weak to even speak properly. Dr. Chen, a petite woman with sharp eyes behind black-rimmed glasses, motioned for me to step out into the hallway. I squeezed Sophie's hand gently, promised to be right back, and followed the doctor. It's not good, she said bluntly once we were out of earshot. Sophie's heart valve is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. She needs valve replacement surgery immediately. But we were scheduled for 2 weeks from now, I said, as if reminding her would change the situation. Dr. Chen shook her head. Sophie doesn't have 2 weeks. She might not even have the 48 hours I mentioned on the phone. We need to operate tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. But the deposit. I started, feeling like I was suffocating. That's the problem, Dr. Chen interjected. Because this is an emergency. We can proceed without the upfront deposit. But the hospital still requires a clear payment plan within 72 hours post-surgery. She paused. I apologize for having to discuss finances at a time like this, Dr. Parker, but it's hospital policy. I closed my eyes, trying to regain my composure. I understand. I'll get the money. As Dr. Chen turned to speak with another nurse. I pulled out my phone and called Amanda. No answer. I sent an urgent text, Sophie worse. Needs surgery tonight. Call me ASAP. I went back into Sophie's room, trying to keep my expression calm. She looked at me with wide, anxious eyes. I'm going to be okay, right? Sophie asked, her voice frail. You're going to be fine. I affirmed, squeezing her hand. They're going to do the surgery sooner than planned. Tonight or tomorrow morning. But the money. Don't worry about that, I said. Forcing a smile I hoped didn't look too strained. I've got it all covered. Sophie closed her eyes, a look of relief passing over her face. I knew you would. You always do. Those words were like a knife to my heart. All her life, Sophie had trusted me unconditionally, always believing I would protect her from everything, including our own family. And now, when she needed me most, I was on the verge of failing her. After Sophie drifted off to sleep from the pain medication, I stepped out into the hallway, despair weighing heavily on my shoulders. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. Ethan Parker, I answered, my voice tired. Dr. Parker, a deep male voice responded. This is Kyle Bennett, from the Griffith Foundation. I frowned, trying to place the name. The Griffith Foundation was a major charitable organization that helped fund complex surgeries for those who couldn't afford them. I'd applied for assistance for Sophie last month but was rejected because we didn't meet the income criteria, a bitter irony considering the combined income of William and Eleanor Parker, who could easily afford the surgery but refused to help. Yes? I asked, not daring to hope. We've reviewed Sophie Parker's case again, the man said. It appears circumstances have changed. And we'd like to offer full financial assistance for the surgery. I nearly collapsed, having to lean against the wall for support. Really? But why? How? An anonymous donor contacted us. Bennett explained. They specifically mentioned your sister's case and have wired sufficient funds to cover the entire procedure. An anonymous donor, I repeated, my mind reeling. I'll email you confirmation and contact the hospital's accounting department right away, Bennett concluded. Good luck with the surgery, Dr. Parker. I stood there, stunned. The phone still pressed to my ear even after the call ended. Who would do that? Who could know about Sophie's situation and have enough money to? No. It couldn't be. I dialed Ryan's number, my breath catching in my throat. Ethan, my brother's voice came through, surprise evident. I didn't think you'd call. Was it you? I asked bluntly. The Griffith Foundation. The anonymous donor. A long pause, and then a soft chuckle. You always were the smart one, Ethan. That's something I've always admired about you. Why? I asked, confused. You took all my money. And now you're just giving it back? This doesn't make any sense. I'm not giving your money back, Ryan replied, his voice suddenly serious. I'm giving my money. $250,000. More than you had saved. I shook my head, unable to comprehend. Why? Because Sophie is my sister. And because I'm not the monster you think I am. You stole my money. I snarled. Money I was saving for Sophie's surgery. Yes, Ryan admitted. And that was a mistake. I didn't know Sophie's condition was that serious. You didn't know? I practically screamed. I told you. I told Mom and Dad. Ethan, Ryan interrupted. Dad told me you were exaggerating. That Sophie just needed a simple procedure, and you were blowing it out of proportion to get attention. I fell silent, shocked by the level of deceit. And you believed that? I did, Ryan admitted, his voice dropping. Until Amanda called me an hour ago and told me Sophie's real situation. She was very convincing. Amanda? I tried to process the information. Amanda had contacted Ryan? After all her warnings about keeping our distance? Amanda called you? I asked, still disbelieving. Yes, Ryan replied. She said Sophie could die if she didn't get surgery immediately. That was not what Dad told me. I leaned against the wall, feeling the floor shift beneath me. All the pieces were falling into place. William hadn't just allowed Ryan to take my money, he had actively lied about Sophie's health to justify it. Why did you believe Amanda over Dad? I asked. My voice hoarse. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Because she had proof, Ethan. Medical records, doctors' opinions, everything. And because I'm not a murderer. I wouldn't let my sister die. I tried to understand the man on the other end of the line. Ryan Parker, the brother I'd always seen as the enemy, the favored one, the smug, uncaring one. But this voice, filled with genuine remorse and concern, didn't fit that image. What about my money? I finally asked. The money you took? That's complicated, Ryan replied, his voice tense. I can't give it back right now. But Sophie will be okay, I've taken care of it. Complicated how? A heavy sigh. Ethan, just take care of Sophie. We'll talk after she's out of surgery. I promise. The call ended, leaving me with more questions than answers. I was about to call back when my phone buzzed, a text from Amanda. We'll be at the hospital in 30. Sophie will be fine. Trust me. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold hospital floor. Relief washed over me, mixed with bewilderment. What was happening? What had Amanda done? And Ryan, why was he helping after everything? Dr. Chen hurried down the hallway, her expression visibly brighter. Dr. Parker, she said, a slight smile on her face. I just got word from accounting. The full cost of the surgery has been covered. We'll be prepping Sophie for the OR in the next hour. I nodded, still too stunned to respond verbally. You know, I finally said as Dr. Chen turned to leave. My cardiac surgery professor used to say, there's nothing more painful than watching a loved one suffer when you can't do anything. Dr. Chen paused, turning back to me with an understanding gaze. And there's nothing more powerful than the love we have for them, Dr. Parker. It makes us do the unimaginable. As she walked away, I wondered who those words applied to in this story. To me, willing to do anything to save Sophie? To Amanda, who had risked contacting Ryan? Or even to Ryan, who had spent $250. 000 to save a sister he rarely seemed to care about? 20 minutes later, I was sitting by Sophie's bed, explaining the upcoming surgery, when I heard a soft knock on the door. Amanda stood there, in the same pantsuit from our earlier meeting, looking tired but determined. Ethan, Sophie exclaimed, her eyes lighting up when she saw Amanda, the sister she hadn't seen in years. Amanda? Hey. Sis, Amanda said softly, entering the room and leaning down to hug Sophie carefully, avoiding the medical tubes. I'd missed you so much. I thought you'd. Sophie began, but trailed off. Disappeared? Amanda finished, a sad smile on her face. I'm sorry about that. But I've always been watching over you from afar. And now I'm back. I motioned for Amanda to join me in the hallway, needing an explanation. Once we were far enough for Sophie not to hear, I looked directly at my sister. You called Ryan? I asked immediately. Amanda nodded, unapologetic. I did what was necessary. Why are you here? To make sure Sophie gets the surgery as promised, Ryan replied, his voice unnervingly calm. And to talk to both of you. Amanda crossed her arms, standing tall. She seemed taller than I remembered, or maybe it was just the way she held herself, confident and unafraid in the presence of the brother we'd both once feared. Talk about what? I asked, tense. Ryan glanced around the hospital corridor. Not here. There's a private waiting room down the hall. We can talk there. I looked towards Sophie's room, worried. She'll be fine, Ryan assured me. They're prepping her for the OR now. We won't be able to go in for a few hours anyway. Reluctantly, I followed Ryan and Amanda into a small family waiting room. It was designed to offer comfort in stressful times, plush armchairs, soft lighting, and peaceful landscape paintings on the walls. But nothing could ease the tension between the three of us as Ryan closed the door. So, Ryan said, not sitting down. Amanda made me a deal. What deal? I looked between my brother and sister, feeling left out of some crucial conversation. Simple, Amanda replied, her voice as serious as if she were in court. Ryan pays for Sophie's surgery, not with the money he took from you, Ethan, but with his own. In return, we don't go public with our findings about his business activities. I stared at Amanda. But you said this was about justice. About stopping them from hurting anyone else. It is, Amanda nodded, her eyes fixed on Ryan. And this is just the first part of the deal. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his neatly cut hair. The rest is that I have to withdraw from my asset management firm, repay all the investors I defrauded, and never work in finance again. I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate reality. This wasn't the arrogant, smug Ryan I knew. And you agreed? Why? Ryan looked me straight in the eye, for probably the first time in years. Because Amanda has evidence not only on my financial dealings, but also on the car accident. That girl, the one I injured. She's still recovering. And William. Dad made the evidence disappear. But how? I started to ask, looking at Amanda. I don't just work for the SEC, Amanda explained. I also have friends in law enforcement who can help gather necessary information. I've been watching our family for years, Ethan. Waiting for the right time. So you're giving up everything, your company, your career, everything, just to avoid prosecution? I asked Ryan. Still incredulous. Ryan scoffed. I'm not giving up anything. I won't have a dime left after I repay all the investors. But yes. That's better than 20 years in prison for securities fraud and fleeing the scene of an accident. What about William? I asked, now concerned with the final piece of the puzzle. Has Dad agreed to this deal? Amanda and Ryan exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. William doesn't know, Ryan finally said. And that's the last part of the deal, Ethan. We, the three of us, are going to confront him together. To do what? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach at the thought of confronting the man who had been the source of my childhood fear. Amanda placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze resolute. To end it, Ethan. Once and for all. Sophie's surgery lasted nearly 9 hours. We, an unlikely trio of Parker siblings, sat in the waiting room, enveloped in a tense silence broken only by occasional updates from the medical staff. When Dr. Chen finally appeared. Her face tired but pleased, I knew Sophie had made it. The surgery was a success, she said, a slight smile gracing her professional demeanor. Sophie is being moved to recovery. She'll need time to heal, but we expect a very positive outcome. The anxiety I hadn't realized I'd been holding in my chest finally released. Without thinking, I hugged Amanda. And after a moment's hesitation, Ryan joined the embrace. The three of us stood there, siblings estranged for too long, reunited by our shared love for our youngest sister. As we pulled apart, I noticed a change in Ryan's eyes, a softness I'd never seen before. You're a good doctor, Ethan, he said, his voice unusually gentle. I never said it. But what you do, saving kids, it's important. Much more important than the numbers on a spreadsheet I've spent my life working on. I was too stunned to respond. Was this Ryan Parker? The arrogant brother who had always mocked my career choice? Amanda watched us, a small smile playing on her lips. It seems we're still a family, in some way. Ryan checked his watch. His expression turning serious. William gets back from his business trip tonight. If we're going to confront him, that's the time. What about Eleanor? I asked. Is Mom coming to see Sophie? Ryan and Amanda exchanged another look. I called her, Ryan admitted. But William forbade her from coming. Said it was just another one of Ethan's dramas to get attention. That it was nothing serious and Sophie was just exaggerating. I shook my head, anger and pain welling up inside me. After all these years, she still can't stand up to him? She never could. Amanda said, her voice low. Not because she doesn't love us, but because she's too afraid. We sat by Sophie's hospital bed, taking turns keeping vigil during those first post-operative hours. When she woke, her eyes blinking against the harsh hospital lights, her weak smile was like the first ray of sunshine after a storm. The whole family's here, Sophie whispered. Her voice hoarse from the recently removed breathing tube. Almost. I fought back emotions as I took her hand. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, Sophie tried to joke. Then winced in pain. But I'm alive. And you're going to live a very, very long time, Amanda added, gently stroking Sophie's hair. Ryan stood back slightly, looking uncomfortable. This was probably the first time in years he'd actually spent time with his sister. Sophie, he finally said. I'm sorry for not being around more. Sophie looked at her oldest brother with clear, unresentful eyes, a trait I'd always admired in her. You're here now. That's what matters. As Sophie drifted into a light, painkiller-induced sleep, the three of us remaining focused on the next task. Amanda pulled a small USB drive from her bag. This is all the evidence on William and Ryan's activities, she said. Suspicious transactions, falsified records, embezzled funds, and all the information on the car accident. Ryan looked at the USB drive with a complex expression, a mixture of regret, fear, and relief. When do we go? Tonight, Amanda decided. William gets home at 8. We'll go at 8:30, once he's settled and Eleanor is there too. I nodded, a nervous anticipation building in my stomach. Will Sophie be okay? The nurse will watch her, Ryan assured. I've arranged for a private nurse to look after Sophie while we're gone. A few hours later, we stood before the Parker mansion, the house I once called home but never truly felt like it was. The massive iron gates opened automatically as Ryan's car approached, a reminder that despite everything, he was still William Parker's eldest son, the heir apparent to the family empire. Ethan. Amanda took my hand as we walked up the steps to the front door. Remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about ending the cycle. You're right, I nodded, trying to stay calm. But that doesn't make it any easier. Ryan opened the door with his key and let us in. The house was as coldly opulent as I remembered, expensive paintings, antique furniture, and a tense silence that permeated everything. William Parker was in his study, a glass of whiskey in hand, his expression unreadable as he saw the three of us walk in together. Eleanor sat in a chair by the window, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. "What is this?" William asked, his voice its usual sharp edge. His gaze moved from Ryan to Amanda, then settled on me with undisguised contempt. "I don't recall inviting a family reunion." "We need to talk, Dad," Ryan said, his tone so serious it made William raise an eyebrow in surprise. "How is Sophie?" Eleanor suddenly interjected, genuine concern in her voice. "Did the baby make it through surgery?" "Yes," I replied, trying to suppress my anger at the mother who hadn't visited her daughter in her critical hour. "She'll be fine, no thanks to your concern." William put his glass down, his expression hardening. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Ethan. If you've come here to cause trouble." "We've come here to face the truth," Amanda interrupted, her voice strong and unwavering. She placed the USB drive on William's desk. "All of it." William looked at the USB, his expression unchanged. "And what might that be?" "Everything," Ryan answered for his sister. "My transactions. Your dirty dealings, Dad, the car accident, everything you and I have covered up over the years." A flicker of unease crossed William's face, but it was quickly replaced by his usual confidence. "Ryan, you don't know what you're talking about. Your brother has clearly dragged you into some kind of charade." "Enough." Eleanor suddenly stood up, her voice higher and stronger than I'd ever heard from her. "William, I can't take this anymore." All of us turned to look at Eleanor, surprised by this sudden outburst. "Eleanor," William growled, a warning in his tone. "You should go to your room and rest." "No," Eleanor shook her head, a new resolve shining in her eyes. "I've been silent for too long. I've let you turn my children into pawns in your power games. It has to stop." Eleanor walked towards us, standing beside Amanda. "You lied to me about Sophie. Told me she just needed a minor procedure, nothing dangerous. She almost died, William." William stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Eleanor, you don't know what you're talking about." "I know more than you think," Eleanor interrupted. "I've been quietly monitoring Sophie's condition. I spoke to her doctors, behind your back. I know how close to death she was." A shocked silence filled the room. I looked at my mother with new eyes, not the weak woman I'd always thought her to be, but someone who had been fighting her own silent battles for years. "Then why were you silent?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Why didn't you help Sophie?" Eleanor turned to me, tears glistening in her eyes. "I tried, Ethan. I secretly transferred $50,000 into your account 2 weeks ago, not enough for the surgery. But it was all I could access without your father's signature." "Didn't you see it?" I was stunned. The mysterious $50,000 that had appeared in my account, I'd assumed it was a bank error and planned to look into it. Before I could, Ryan had taken everything. Ryan looked equally bewildered. "You helped Ethan? But you always said he was exaggerating." "That's what I had to say in front of your father," Eleanor replied. "You don't understand, Ryan. None of you understand what it's been like for me." William advanced, his face red with fury. "That's enough. All of you, get out of my house, now." "No," Amanda said, stepping forward to face the man we had feared for so many years. "You can't order us around anymore, William. The game is over." Amanda pulled a set of papers from her briefcase. "This is the agreement. Ryan will divest from his company and repay the defrauded investors. In return, he will not face criminal charges." William scoffed. "And I should care about this because if Ryan faces criminal charges," Amanda continued, "you will face charges for complicity. Not to mention obstruction of justice in the car accident." William fell silent, assessing the situation with the cold eyes of a master poker player. Ryan stepped forward, standing beside Amanda. "Dad, I've signed the agreement. I'll lose everything, the company, the money, the reputation. But Sophie will live, and I won't go to prison." "So you betray me?" William snarled, his eyes like daggers on Ryan. "After everything I've done for you? What have you done for me?" Ryan asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Taught me how to lie, cheat, and steal? Taught me that money and power are more important than family? I don't want to live like that anymore." William turned to me. "And you, Ethan, you think you've won? You think Sophie will be fine just because the surgery was a success? Who's going to pay for her recovery? The medications? The follow-up appointments? I stiffened. I hadn't thought about that. The surgery was just the first step. Sophie would need long-term medical care, and with my pediatric residency salary, I couldn't cover it all. I will, Eleanor said suddenly. I have my own money William doesn't know about, an inheritance from my family that I've kept hidden from him for years. William whirled around to face his wife, astounded. What? Eleanor smiled sadly. Did you think I didn't have a contingency plan, William? I've lived with you long enough to know I needed an escape route. Amanda hugged her mother, tears streaming down her face. You were always the smartest one in the family. William looked around the room, realizing he had lost control. You can't do this. I'll destroy all of you. No, you won't, Ryan said, his voice firm. Because if you try, we'll go public with everything. And you have too much to lose. William fell silent again, his gaze shifting from one person to another, assessing. I saw the exact moment he understood he had lost, a slight narrowing of his eyes, a deep breath, and a subtle change in his posture. So what do you want? He finally asked, his voice diminished. The terms are simple, Amanda replied. You will sign divorce papers, allowing Eleanor her freedom with an equitable share of the assets. You will never contact Sophie again. And you will let Ryan fulfill his agreement without interference. And in return? We keep this private, Amanda concluded. No one outside this room will know what you've done. William stared at the USB drive on his desk, then looked up at his 3 children and the wife who had betrayed him. For a rare moment, I thought I saw something akin to regret in his eyes. Fine. William finally said, his voice bitter. You win. 3 months later, I sat in Boston Common, watching Sophie toss breadcrumbs to the ducks in the pond. My sister had made an incredible recovery, not just physically, but emotionally. There was a new strength in her stride, a new light in her eyes. Eleanor sat beside me on the park bench, looking years younger and much more relaxed than the stressed woman I'd known all my life. She had moved into an apartment near the hospital, where Sophie still had regular checkups. The divorce had been settled quickly and quietly. William Parker was too smart to fight, especially with the threat of Amanda's evidence hanging over him. Ethan, Eleanor began, breaking the comfortable silence between us. I wish I'd been stronger, sooner. For all of you. I looked at the woman I had blamed for so many years, realizing she had been a victim in her own way. You did what you could, Mom, under the circumstances. It wasn't enough, she sighed. But I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. Amanda arrived with 2 coffees, handing one to me and one to Mom. She had moved back to Boston, working for a law firm specializing in patient rights and medical malpractice. We had slowly rebuilt our relationship, rediscovering the sibling bond we had missed for so long. Ryan called this morning, Amanda said, sitting down beside me. He's finalized the restitution to the last investor. I nodded, still feeling complicated about my brother. Ryan had kept his word. He'd given up everything, paid back those he'd defrauded, and was now working at a nonprofit that helped families with children suffering from heart conditions access medical care they couldn't afford. A complete turnaround. But I still wasn't sure if I could fully forgive him. He also asked if he could visit Sophie this weekend, Amanda continued. What do you think? I looked at Sophie, now laughing with a small child who was also feeding the ducks. That's Sophie's decision, I replied. She's old enough to decide who deserves to be in her life. Eleanor smiled sadly. You all deserved a better family than what your father and I created. We're building a new one, Amanda said softly. The kind of family we deserve. Sophie ran towards us, her cheeks flushed from the crisp Boston autumn air. Ethan, she called, waving a piece of paper. I just got my acceptance email for the hospital volunteer program. I can start next week. I grinned, proud of the sister who had turned her own painful experience into a drive to help others. That was one of the things I admired most about her, her ability to find light even in the darkest of times. As I hugged Sophie and we all laughed together, I realized that while blood may be thicker than water, not all blood relations bring strength. Sometimes, real family are the people you choose, the ones who stand by you when the world turns its back. And sometimes, blood can indeed be what drowns you. But if you're strong enough to swim against the current, you can find a new, safer shore, where relationships are built on truth, loyalty, and unconditional love. As we walked through the park together, Sophie, Eleanor, Amanda, and I knew that though the scars remained, we were finally healing. Not as the Parkers of old, but as new, better versions of ourselves. And that, I realized, was the most precious thing of all.